wanted to dive into it. So what are some common misconceptions in corporate law, like especially when you're like dealing with an initial client? Like, what do you hear that drives you like kind of maybe drives you crazy, or you're like, oh my God, I can't believe they're thinking this.
Yeah, I mean, God, there could be a laundry list of them. But I think, firstly, a very basic one is, clients starting a business and they say, hey, I've spoken to my friend and they set up an LLC. LLCs are a very popular entity of choice for a number of businesses, and that they're a great entity of choice for a number of businesses. But it may not always be the right entity choice, right? So I think that is sometimes a little frustrating, or it's sort of, I treat it more as an education exercise where I kind of wind them back and say, one size doesn't fit all. The type of business you're going to set up, just understanding the difference between a DBA and a sole proprietor and an actual legal entity, right? There's a big misconception that people think a DBA, because they've gone and registered it at the county recorder's office, and they operate under this brand name, they think, okay, I have a separate entity, but they don't. Right? So even just getting back to the basics to help a client understand those differences is a very common misconception. This idea that I can just use one entity for all things. The same then is true that I can use one document for all things. It clearly is not the case. Just because it fit for one company, one type of deal, it's not necessarily true for another deal. I've done this week, and we're a week into April, right? This month, I should say, and we're 1 week into April. I'm in the middle of 3 different acquisitions, 2 are stock purchase agreements and 1 is an asset purchase agreement. And, the client started with, they're a somewhat sophisticated client, said, hey, could we just, you must have a template. Can we just use the same thing? And because what they're really saying is, can we keep this as cheap as possible? And I try to be very economical about it, but I'm also very honest with them. I said, look, each deal you cannot, appreciate enough how different each deal is. And so those 3 agreements I'm working on are wildly different. I certainly have a base I can start from, but the deal terms are going to be different, right? What is being bought, what's going to be excluded. So I think that's important for people to also understand when you're making these sorts of decisions. You're starting a business which is maybe a $50,000, $100,000, or a multi-million-dollar business. Investing the time up front to get it right is extremely important. So that misconception, one type of company, one type of document fits all, I think are certainly some of the bigger misconceptions, I kind of come across.